Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video, I'm going to be going through the latest deals on GoG, Good Old Games, as it used to be known. This is actually a fairly good deal, actually, for the day's special, which currently has about 23 hours left. It's a Cyberpunk Steampunk bundle, which is 75% off, and just like previously, the more games you add, the more greater the saving. So, I'm going to first of all start off with the obvious ones, Thieves. You've got Thief Gold, Thief 2, The Metal Age, and Thief 3, A Deadly Shadows. I think a lot of people know about Thief, and for those of you who are not that familiar with it, it's a great, fantastic gaming series. Thief 1 had some issues, mostly involving the zombies and the undead, but and also of course it looks a little bit old now. If you actually want to look at the release date for this game, it was made late 1998, which is of course around the same, not exactly the same, but around the same time the Half-Life first burst into the scene. And it's safe to say that you can see some issues with architecture and textures. That isn't to say it's the worst looking game that you'll ever see in your life. It's probably up there with some of the indie titles you can buy now, quite honestly. But at the same time, you might not be 100% happy to get it. What is worth noting, however, is that it also includes the Thief Dark Project and the Gold Update, which basically has some extra campaigns and some other bits and pieces. It's also worth noting that this game really does put an emphasis on stealth. It does have some faults here and there, but in terms of stealth, it's probably one of the best. As I said, later on it kind of breaks the immersion. However, Thief 2 The Metal Age is another fantastic game. It scores really well with critics as well. I don't think I've met many people who have actually said to me, even in the gaming community or the review community, and said, hey, you know what, Thief sucks. They might say it's not their type of game, but bloody hell, they like the game itself. And the same thing goes for Deadly Shadows, although it probably wasn't up there to the original game experience offered by, say, the original Thief, is basically what it comes down to. Although that isn't to say it's terrible. Thief 3, which is the latest of the games, was released back in 2004, which makes it the more modern of the titles. It's also worth noting that it was also released on the Xbox One, which some people blamed the game for impacting it negatively. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. And it also used the Unreal Engine 2, which is interesting. It was, however, heavily modified and also used Havok's physics. And some of you guys might recognize Havok. It certainly seems to be one of the more popular physics-based engines, certainly around now anyway. Next up we have the Deus Ex titles. Deus Ex, the original, also known as Game of the Year edition in this particular case, is probably one of the love affairs for PC gaming. If you guys want to take a look at it in terms of the screenshots and that type of thing, it's aged a little bit. It was released a while ago now. It was released in 2000, well actually 2000, that's it, June of course, and that makes it fairly old, about 12 years. So you can imagine how much time is actually, pushed forward graphically. But still, it's a very immersive title. And some people would argue, I'm not going to get into the debate, but some people will argue it's a lot better than its successors. That isn't to say that the latest in the Deus Ex range was bad. I actually really liked it. Although I did feel it had a few weak points, mostly regarding to do with the choice system. I didn't particularly like how the game didn't reward you equally for your decisions when it came to, say, how you would take down an enemy, whether you want to go the stealthy or lethal approach, that type of thing. And quite a few people had issues with that. But the Game of the Year edition is a fantastic experience, and of course it will work fine on Windows Vista and 7 and so forth. Honestly, people who played it back in the day will probably have slightly rose-tinted glasses with this, but I think it's for a reason, and it's probably one of the more freedom of choice games available, as particularly for the time. It was infinitely better in most people's opinion than the successor, which is also available in the pack, might I add, also known as Deus Ex 2, also known as Invisible War. Invisible War, sorry, was a fantastic game. It wasn't terrible or anything, but it suffered a little bit, mostly due to the simplification. The simplification, in most people's opinions, was because it was released on the consoles. It was released, of course, on the Xbox One, and many people blamed the consoles for a very dumbed down port, and I'm paraphrasing the opinions of a lot of the gaming community. I'm not, having a go at console gamers at all. And because of this, people marked it down substantially from the original. That isn't to say it's a terrible game. It's actually still worth picking up, but it's just not as legendary as the first one. I'm sorry. It, however, is notable in that it's several years later. Well, yeah, around 3 years later. So graphically, you can tell the difference. It definitely features nicer lighting, textures, and that type of thing, and geometric details in particular nicer. However, let's just be honest. I think many of us would agree that that's not necessarily maketh a good gamer, if you will forgive the rather odd way I said that. Next title in this rather interesting pack is Anachronox. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, to be honest with you. And it's one of the few titles in this pack that I haven't actually played. In fact, it's the only title in this pack I haven't played. It was released back in June 2001. So this pack, to be honest with you, has particularly older games, which isn't necessarily a problem. It does actually feature quite well in terms of the reviews and stuff, if you guys will check them out. And interestingly enough, I quote directly from the GoG What's Cool About It section. Great mix of Japanese Western style RPG elements and great humour, a gripping story, and very unique cast of characters. I can't tell you whether I personally would love it, as I haven't played it, but what I can tell you is most people seem to enjoy it, and so it could be worth picking up. It's also worth noting that it's basically free. It's $1.49 anyway, so if you're planning to get the rest of the pack, it could be worth it. This is a case where I'd be really torn whether I would buy the whole pack or not. If I were, say, a younger person, by younger it's not like I'm old, but let's say I never played those games back in the early 2000s. Let's say, I just thought to myself, hey, I missed them. Or let's say I was a console player back then and you didn't own a PC and you thought, you know what, I want to play those titles. You could probably just be happy and pick up FIFA Gold and Deus Ex Game of the Year edition, and I don't think many people would judge you for doing so, good sir, or madam indeed. I think they would actually be quite glad you did. It's certainly a great historical piece of games in this particular pack, and I would encourage you to go forth and reward the developers with your hard-earned cash. It's also worth noting that I really wish they would make another FIFA title, but that's just I think we're going to have to kind of chalk that up, at least for now, with the desires for another Magic Carpet, Dungeon Keeper, and God knows what else. Anyway, hopefully you guys have found the video somewhat entertaining, or at least somewhat knowledgeable. I don't think I've told you guys that much. You probably wouldn't have already known unless you're fairly new to the PC gaming scene. But regardless, hopefully you guys have found it useful. So, as usual, leave comments below if you have any thoughts on the particular titles, and obviously, as I said, you've got about 22 hours for this about 23 hours to be exact, for this particular title before it rolls over. And also, of course, I'll be covering tomorrow's deals. I think all of us are waiting with bated breaths, and we're probably trying to hide our wallets at this point from the Steam sales, which, as we all know, is imminent. Steam haven't announced anything yet, but it's fairly good deal. It's probably going to be on the 19th of December, which coincides really well, actually, considering the fact that I've well, breaking up from work on the 19th of December. So that actually makes me a very, very, very happy man. And if I was into dancing in the streets butt naked, by golly, I'd just do that. So anyway, I will see you guys around soon, and I'm really going this time, so take care of yourselves.